Hi everyone, and welcome to the Millcreek Government Channel. I'm Chantel Rodriguez.
And I'm Jessica Stutzman, and we're excited to be here with you today.
We have a great conversation lined up with Kristen Huber, Clinical Services Specialist, who's here to talk with us about the Highmark Caring Place.
Thanks for joining us, Kristen. Let's get started.
Yeah, so, knowing very little about the Highmark Caring Place before actually coming to interview you, what is the important work that you all do? And can you share the mission and who you serve?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad to be here. So we are a grieving center. We are a place where kids can come after someone very special in their life has died. We support children from birth until seniors in high school. But we also just started, through the pandemic, a young adult group, and that is for young adults 18 to 30, and it's all virtual. So it's an amazing program that we've developed because I actually did one last year, and I had people in Florida and Michigan, California. Oh, wow. So it's just a way to connect those young adults in a really significant and special way.
Yeah, and even doing those things for the virtual programs, how did people respond to that? Did they love it, or do they want to meet in person? How does that work?
Well, it's in the early stages, so I think they're loving it because it's so different than anything they've ever experienced, yeah. Right? Typically, grief support is done in person, at a location. So far, so good. It's going very well.
Yeah, and what are the testimonials from these people that are joining these virtual programs, and what do they have to say about it?
Well, I would say not just the virtual. I would say the virtual and our in-person group. The number one thing that people say is they don't feel so alone. Mm-hmm. That is the number one thing that people say after they've had a death in their life. No one understands what it's like to lose a sister. No one understands what it's like to lose a mother. And just by putting those people connected with other people who kind of get it, it takes away that really kind of lonely, empty feeling.
Yeah, and I think going into Jesse's question, that might be a really good one to follow up with.
And exactly, and I also want to say too, coming into the show today, I think it was, I don't know if it was ironic or if it was just coincidental. My daughter said, and again, talking about, grieving children, my daughter said to me, "Mommy, why have I not been allowed to go to a funeral with you?" And I said, "Well, that's a good question." I said, there's, they range, and I'm trying to explain, grief and death to my 7-year-old. Sure. And so, this is in the 5 seconds before we're walking into school. So I'm like, this is a lot to unpack in 30 seconds. And so, and with, what you guys just talked about, and then me thinking about the conversation with my daughter this morning, what are some of the biggest challenges grieving children face? And then how do you guys get them through it?
I would say exactly what I just said to Chantel, just feeling so alone, not knowing how to handle those really big feelings. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when the adult caregivers call us, kind of wanting to learn more about the program and how to support their child, they will say they're doing things they haven't done in a long time, crawling into my bed, they're having aggressive outbursts, they're struggling in school, how can we make this better? Mm-hmm. Well, you can't fix it. You can't fix grief unless you're able to bring that person back, which we know we can't do, right? Mm-hmm. So just by coming to the caring place and putting them with other kids, other adults who have had a loss, but the most important piece are the volunteers. Mm-hmm. Our volunteers are trained to listen and to support the children and adults that come to our program. And that is really essentially, I don't want to say it, but it's a big thing, because if you think about listening, I always think I'm a good listener, and then I go through my volunteer training at the Caring Place, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not a very good listener. Because when you really sit and listen and hold someone's pain, it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. But that's what these people need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need someone else to carry it for them for a minute, or, programs, run for weeks. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as I was thinking about answering this question for my daughter, death is such a monumental, enormous question in and of itself. I don't know that adults can fully understand it at times. Why did this happen to this person? Again, I was giving her an example. Why does cancer have to exist? Why do accidents happen? They're such a good person. It shouldn't have been them. And there's all these massive, massive questions. I don't know that adults handle it very well. Why? And we, think that, okay, come on, just get back to yourself, be your 7-year-old self playing again.
Right.
And how can you expect that?
And I think for adult caregivers, what do we do when kids have questions? We want to find the answer, right? We want to fix it. We want to make it better. If I don't have the answer, let me go find someone who has the answer. Do you know what some of the answers are? I'm not really sure about that. I wonder why that happened too, right? But for us, sometimes it feels funny because it's not the exact answer.
Solution.
But what is the answer when they ask those really big questions, right? We don't know why that happened.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's so monumental that it's hard to grasp.
And death is something that we all can't avoid. So for us to have the tools to better navigate grief, especially with kids, is definitely a big topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and even with the schools and caregivers, like how can these communities best support children and who are dealing with loss? Like, what are the options that they have with Highmark?
Well, we actually have a full-time staff who is a school services coordinator. We know that not every child can get to the caring place. Number one, they can't get there because maybe their adult doesn't want to come, right? Our program is child-centered, but it's family-focused. So what that means, a child must be attending the caring place in order for the adult caregivers to attend and get the support. Sometimes the adults just aren't ready.
Yeah.
Sometimes the adults are just too busy, work and other commitments, or distance. So John will go to local schools in the area. He will do grief support groups in the schools. He goes to distances to do those grief support groups, but also presentations about grief. How to support a child, a friend, when they come back to school after they had someone in their life die. Bullying happens even with grief in a really, really significant way. So our hope is to give the language to those kids so it's not so awkward when their friend comes back to school.
And and I love that you said that, because I think sometimes we've all had that friend that went through that, traumatic loss, and there are no words. I can produce no words.
I'll tell you the words. I have no idea what to say to make you feel better, and I know I can't, but if you ever need to talk, I'm here to listen, because I know I can't fix this.
Yeah.
But what do people typically do is try to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Try to be the problem solver.
Problem solver, or I feel like avoid
Yes.
completely. If I just don't bring it up, I won't make them sad.
Right, I think they're in a better place, or at least they're not suffering. I get all those things, but to someone who is grieving, those are not helpful. The helpful thing is, this is really awful. I know I can't fix it, but I know I'll listen if you need me to.
Yeah, just being there, being that pillar of support for that person.
Yes.
And I think I've always been the type of person to, out of turn, say that, and without even thinking, it's just muscle memory. And I think afterward, you kind of like, I could have worded that just simply better and just say, hey, I'm here for you.
Right.
And I think a lot of people need to hear that. Just knowing that you're going to be there for them, their rock.
We need to train ourselves with new muscle memory
Yeah.
phrases. You know what I mean?
I have my fellow in thanatology, which is just a super nerdy word for someone who knows a whole bunch about loss and grief and death. And I will sometimes say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. That's okay. But the better comment is, I'm really sad to hear that your dad died. That must be really difficult for you. So I just added a couple words on, as opposed to, I'm so sorry for your loss, right? But that's the muscle memory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we just got to retrain ourselves and just add a little bit more in practice. Maybe it is uncomfortable. I mean, how many times again that you're like, I sound super awkward. That's not what they care about. They care that you're there and comforting them. Yeah. So, and speaking of comforting, friends, what role do peer support groups play in helping other kids navigate the grief?
Well, I think it goes back to feeling all alone, right? They're going to school, they're going to soccer, they're hanging out with friends. And in those circles, they don't have anyone there who has gone through something that they've gone through. So just by putting them in a space with other kids is a very powerful experience.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, and many people probably like me, we don't know about these services until we actually need them. But how does someone get started if they go through a death in the family or a friend? How could they get your support?
They can, call us We also have the Highmark Caring Place website. They can do like a contact form and then give us information about kind of what services they're looking for, and then we will connect them and have a conversation with them about their experience. We also do anticipatory loss. Many people don't know that. If they know someone in their life, a child is going to lose a parent, how to support them in that process, but also words. So if a child has lost a grandparent, how do you explain that to them? Because there's different ways to explaining death from someone who is 5 to 7 to 17, right?
Well, and like you said, sometimes anticipating it, sometimes, loss, kind of smacks us in the face and comes out of nowhere. And then sometimes, unfortunately, it can be a long, painfully drawn out process.
Yes.
And, just, kind of setting those,
Yes.
those, practices into motion ahead of time, might help. And so speaking of that, I think it's kind of leading here. What kind of resources either do you provide in person or on your website, or just that you've stumbled across and you recommend for adults who are trying to say the right thing, trying to help that grieving child, but just, again, I'm at a loss and I don't know where to go?
Right. Tons of resource on our Caring Place page. Brochures, they can call us, we can mail brochures to them. Question Grieving Children's Ask, that is literally a brochure and gives you the words to kind of answer those really hard questions.
Wonderful, thank you. The other thing I want to touch on too is when you walk into the Caring Place, the one thing that when I have been there that I have really loved is the first section. There is, a seating area and almost like a library section with books on grief. Can you talk about that area?
Yes, we have we actually have another area, but you probably, because it's not right in that space, but tons of books for kids, and it's actually separated, maybe a grandparent loss, a parent loss, a pet loss, lots of different type of losses, right? And once a family becomes a part of our program, they can absolutely sign one of those books out, take them home to read to their children. And then we also have an adult area. So there's books for adults that they can sign out that we believe would be really helpful in their journey.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and looking at all of the resources that you guys provide for families, what are the best ways for people who want to volunteer their time and help out to the Caring Place, whether it be through donations or volunteering their own hours? How can they go about that?
Once again, calling us, getting in touch with me. You can find my information right on the Highmark Caring Place website. 90% of what we do at the Caring Place is done by volunteers. We are a very, very small staff of 7. We could not support the hundreds of families that come to us really needing that support if it weren't for our volunteers. I mean, they're the absolute core of our program. And in terms of donations, our biggest need is tissues, right? That's what a grieving center needs. Model Magic is always something that we love to have on hand. It's nice for kids to have something to kind of fidget with when they're talking about that big stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you speak of volunteers, I know I've chatted with some of your volunteers in the past. Can you just speak about, again, how you go about being a volunteer, but how, what process they go through in training, and then, how long are they with you guys, or what do you do once you're approved and move into that role? What's expected of you next?
Well, the first step is for them to go on a tour. I want them to see our space. I want them to make sure they know what they're kind of getting into, because being a volunteer at a grieving center can be complicated, right? But there's online modules that they have to kind of complete. There's in-person training that they have to complete. And then once they're in our grief support groups, they're really mentored by a veteran volunteer that will help and support them kind of along the way. I am so blessed. I have volunteers that have been there since day one, probably 8 or 9, so 25 plus years. I mean, when volunteers come to the Caring Place, they love it so much, they stay for a really long time. Really, they do.
Yeah, and so that's what I was going to say too. I mean, it sounds like really sad, heavy work that you have to carry with you, but that it is so rewarding.
When you say grieving center, people don't want to come to a grieving center because it's sad, right? You do not know until you know that although we are a grieving center, there is much more laughter than there is sadness. There's absolutely sadness, but once you get there and understand That's why kids want to come back, because we provide a safe space and do fun activities to get them talking about their feelings, talking about their memories, talk about how their life has changed since their person has died. If you say just that sounds really sad, but when you do it in a really kind of fun, supportive way, that's why they want to keep coming and coming.
And you talk about people coming back.
Yes.
And like, do you ever work with someone, see them through their grief, during that time that they're at the Highmark Caring Place, and then do they ever come back just to say thank you, kind of just to say thank you for being there for me, like when they maybe have felt alone or just needed someone to talk to? Do you ever get to see those faces come back to you?
Well, what I will say is families can stay as long as they want. They can be a part of our program for years. If they are still getting support and they're feeling like their children are getting, that connectedness, they can come for as long as they want, and everything is absolutely free. And there's constant, families, kids, coming to us and just saying how our program has impacted them and how happy they are that they came, because they are not sure where their family would have been if they didn't come to our program.
And the one thing I want to mention, you mentioned this when you were talking about the volunteers, how you want them to get a tour of your facility. And I know we did that a couple years ago here at the MGC channel, but when you walk in, you see the library of resources. What are some of the other rooms that families experience? And I was telling Chantel before the show that kids experience grief. They're sad, they're angry, they feel guilty, they feel numb. Like there's just all these different emotions bottled and pent up. So can you share some of those rooms that are available?
Sure. I mean, the community room is kind of where all the families gather, and it's kind of a nice way to kind of get them connected in a very informal space. We have an expressions room, a place where they can go and get those really big feelings out, an activities room, and then of course, all of the group rooms. But I think one of the most significant parts of the Caring Place are all the quilts that hang throughout the facility. The families, when they come to the Caring Place program, have the opportunity to do a quilt square in honor and memory of the person who died. And I've been there 11 years, and I still sometimes walk past and get the chills, just because all those people, right, that are really missed and loved, but all of those families came and were connected with one another.
They are so beautiful.
They are.
It does make you well up. Like walking through that hallway is very, very emotional.
Yes.
But you can feel the therapy that has been in effort and energy that has been put toward that.
And
level.
volunteers make those quilts. I have quilters who do all of those beautiful quilts that hang throughout the facility.
Yeah, and it's just a special moment between the person who makes that, creates it, and is able to honor their loved one in that way. So I think that's a beautiful message as far as the mission that you guys have, and just seeing the faces of those people that have passed on, but you were able to help their family through it.
Yes.
So it's just a beautiful mission altogether.
Yeah. So again, you said the services are free.
Yes.
We're just about to a close here, but can you tell us again just the contact information, where we find you guys, how do we get in touch?
Highmarkcaringplace.com. That's the easiest way to kind of get connected to us. That's where you can find the resources. That's where you can get connected. If you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in potentially being part of a grief support group in person or our virtual young adult group.
Perfect. Well, we thank you so much
Yes,
for coming
you'll have
on
to come visit
yes,
us.
we're going to make that a list.
Good.
But thank you again so much
Absolutely.
for coming on to MGC. Thank you so much for joining us on MGC. We appreciate you tuning in and listening to the wonderful stories that we're able to share about our nonprofits locally. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again.